Hello, everybody. Welcome back. This week, we're going to focus on the design principle of rhythm, but we're going to also speak to movement and pattern as well. So let's begin. What is rhythm? Well, think about, music in a sense. It's easy to recognize rhythm when you're talking about music. So basically, in my opinion, rhythm is not it's not as clear cut as like color. You have to be able to recognize the visual beats of a photographic piece. Okay. Now let's talk about some basics of rhythm. Okay. um Make sure that you understand that a rhythm has a pattern. Wait, a pattern has rhythm, but not all rhythm is patterned. Lines can create rhythm by conveying movement. Shapes can create rhythm by how they are placed next to one another. And we've learned all about patterns and lines and shapes. Okay, so everything that you've learned thus far, we're going to incorporate it into these activities that are coming up. With practice, we can find a rhythm in the style, technique, brushstroke, colors, and patterns that photographers use. With practice, you'll be creating rhythms within your own photos, and the rhythms can also establish an energy or a mood or like a physical sensation through your image. Okay, so what is rhythm? What do you think is the rhythm of this image? Have no idea? Okay, so let me break it down to you. Think of the rise within the the gate, okay? Think of this as a music scale, okay? So if I was to say do, re, mi, fa, sol, and keep going, this shows the rhythm, the rise within the music scale. A very basic, simple landscape image that has movement and it has consistency. Okay, does that make sense? Let's look at some more. So, what is the rhythm you think in this image? Do you see any forms of a pattern or movement? Where does your eyes take you when you look at this? Does it take you around in a circle? Because this is an excellent, simple way of showing rhythm. In this image, you start in the middle and you start to do a diagonal type of movement, which is considered rhythm. Okay. Now, when you talk about rhythm, let's talk about the difference between patterns and repetition. Both of these can work together to create rhythm, but it does not mean there's rhythm in the photo. Okay. Rhythm will have some repetition or pattern within your photo, but rhythm is not predictable. Okay, so for pattern, it's usually a repeating artistic element or a decorative design. Patterns are predictable. You know the very next pattern will be the same and over. Okay, so that's a clear cut way of knowing whether your image is a pattern, your photo is a pattern, or versus repetition, which repetition is an element in art that is repeated. Pure repetition only has one element. Okay, in patterns you have the same many elements, but in repetition you have one element and that's it. Okay, now let's talk about small versus large and slow versus fast rhythms to give you some more in-depth examples. Okay, so if if the elements is small, let's say you take a picture and the element within your picture, or you have many elements, they're small, your eyes will jump around soft like a grasshopper. Can you see it? You're going to jump around to be able to see the different elements in the image. But if your elements are large, your eyes will jump around loudly. So you have a lot of large elements, so it's going to be very loud and you're looking all around. Now, if let's say your elements are, if there are only like a few elements in your image and they are spread apart visually, then the rhythm is going to be slow. Okay. So you see how this is spread it far from here. Your element is the clock. All right. Now let's say if there are a lot of elements and they are close together, the visual rhythm, remember you're looking for like a visual type beat. The visual rhythm, if you have a lot of elements that are close together, is going to be fast. Okay? So this displays a lot of elements together, and the rhythm to this is a fast example. Okay? Do you guys see it? All right, let's move on. So, let's recap, okay? Because rhythm does not need to be regular. It focuses, like the rhythm's focus or whatever your focus is in the image that you're going to be creating, it does use repeated elements to create movement. If you have a repeated element that makes your eye want to move around, then you most definitely need to use rhythm for that image that you are going to write about. Okay, so remember, rhythm is the way your eye jumps around your artwork. That's a very key indicator for knowing if you're creating a rhythm image. For instance, this is your element and your eye follows it around. For instance, with these poles, your eyes follow it around. And even with these crayons, different colors, same elements, is just different. The way that is laid out is different, but you can clearly see the movement of diagonal. Okay. So let's talk about rhythm versus movement. Okay. So we know what the definition of rhythm is. We know rhythm is like a movement in which some elements reoccur regularly. Like, for instance, a dance, it will flow of objects that will seem to be like, the beat of the music. But movement's definition is the pathway. I'm sorry, it is the path that the viewer's eyes take through the artwork or, your photo, often to a focal area. It can be directly directed along lines, edges, shapes, and color. Movement is closely tied to rhythm. All right. Now, although both design principles can suggest motion, don't confuse them because rhythm is especially concerned with repeating design elements such as patterns and colors to pull the viewer's eye throughout an image or a document. The designer or photographer may use rhythm as a means of conveying movement, but rhythm won't always be used that way. Movement, on the other hand, it's used to imply action. In creating a sense of movement, the designer can use um, rhythm along with other graphic design principles and elements to give the viewers like a sense of motion within the image. So for instance, this person coming out of the water, you would just play with your shutter speeds. The dog is trying to catch the frisbee, or even this guy who is simply waving his hand back and forth. Okay, keep in mind the difference between the rhythm and the movement because you will be making some movement images on its own that should not include rhythm. All right, so let's look at rhythm by repetition. All right. So repetition is the simplest way to obtain rhythm, and it can be achieved by repeating any of the elements of design. For instance, line, if you repeat a line, color, texture, pattern, light, and scale and proportion. And we've learned about line, color, texture, and we're learning about pattern, but we've definitely learned about light. So if you have those elements completely repeat over and over within a picture, then that is called repetition. So, for example, this is an image of a pizza shop by Bayners and co-designer, And this shows the repeating wood slates on the wall over and over and over and over and over again. This creates a playful rhythm and draws your eyes through the space. Repetition in design can work in a number of different ways. Having repeating design elements within the work is not inherently a flawed approach. Rather, repetition allows for a single point to be repeated numerous times throughout your photograph. One of the examples that can clarify the principle of repetition is to set like a set of stairs. Okay? So, imagine, going up a set of stairs. Each one of these steps will repeat with similar size and shape in a sequence to form the stairwells itself. So that is what repetition is. Same size, same shape, same idea. All right. Now, let's talk about rhythm versus pattern. All right. Because all of these show pattern, but there are not any rhythms in here. Because again, rhythm is when you take an image and you have elements that makes your eye move in a certain direction. Okay. So patterns can have multiple meanings and elements in design. Repetition focuses on the same object being repeated. Patterns are made up from different components, which are then repeated in the same way through the design. A seamless pattern is one that flows throughout without flaw in the beginning or in the end. And again, remember, patterns are expected. You can predict a pattern, okay? The entire pattern is a single coherent unit. This approach to design becomes especially important when thinking about design which incorporates significant amounts of color, texture, and depth. Using a pattern can be complex. As with photography, the examples above, patterns can be used to put the user at ease and to allow them to navigate tools throughout the design. In architecture, patterns in many forms have been used to improve the quality of structures, to stamp design authority, and to provide necessary user guidance. The use of such patterns can emphasize the user experience. Okay. So these are examples of some patterns, some simple patterns you can find around your house or outside or even in the school for when you do this activity. Okay. Now, unlike repetition and pattern above, rhythm has this image is a example of a rhythm um, photo. Okay. Rhythm has slightly more complexity to it. So you can have an image that is strictly a pattern image or strictly a repetition image. But when you have an image that has that repetition in it and it informs your eye to a movement or a pattern that makes your eye go into a movement, that's when you have rhythm. Now, rhythm has slightly more complexity to it, as I said, where repetition and pattern requires the same design element to be repeated throughout the design in the same way. Rhythm requires the repetition of a variety of design elements in a specific order. Okay. As a result, if you look at this picture here, the individual design elements may not repeat or be the same at all points. Rather, their repetition is adaptable and changes throughout the design. Okay. This right here is the rhythm. Rhythm can be observed in architecture design, such as this Australian opera house regular rhythm you see here. Um, The design elements are repeated in the same manner throughout the design. Flowing rhythm allows a greater diversity of design elements, but with greater diversity in the element size, sequence, nature, and so on, you have many other factors you have to think about when you're drafting this photo. There are many different types of rhythm that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about irregular rhythm. We've already talked about regular rhythm. We're going to talk about progressive rhythm, and we're going to talk about staccato rhythm. But I do want to point out with progressive rhythm, it allows for the greatest amount of diversity. Okay. With progressive rhythm, elements are repeated, but there is variation in any of the elements throughout, right? So let's talk about first irregular rhythm. All right. So a regular rhythm shows repeated elements, but not with expected precision. So for instance, in these rowboats, you have the repeated elements of the rowboats, okay? They're in different colors and they're in different positions, okay? But you see the flow of an irregular rhythm, okay? So keep that in mind because you will have to take a picture of an irregular rhythm, showcasing irregular rhythm, right? Now, here's another example of a regular rhythm. On a beach, you have the rhythm of the waves. Now, the waves are repeated across the image, but there are unevenly spaced, vary in size, make it difficult to predict what's the next wave going to look like. So, this is an example of irregular rhythm. Okay. Now, let's talk about progressive rhythm. All right. So as though they are, demonstrated, we talked about, let's use the example of some steps or shadows. We're going to use the example of shadows because you guys did an activity with shadows. So with progressive rhythm, the elements change proportionate or size as they move across the space. So with this example, as though they are demonstrating a progression of steps, rhythm can also be achieved through progression. Examples are gradients of colors or series of objects that start small and become large in a very regular manner. So for this image, you would have progressive rhythm with the shadows getting smaller as they go down. Okay. Do you see that? How it starts large here and it gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller like that. So this is the example of a progressive. Now, the most funnest one to me is your staccato rhythm. And the reason why staccato rhythm is so fun is because with staccato rhythm, it's an image that acts like a visual burst of sounds. It's whatever you can produce that has some type of occurrence, but the viewer can hear the sound. All right. So any type of staccato rhythm they are basically abrupt repetition that occur and changes frequently with no set pattern, like a burst of something or something shattering, but the viewer can hear the sound, right? So keep this in mind because you are going to have to create these rhythms. So just to review, you have regular rhythm where you have a sense of like a repetition, but you also have movement within that repetition. It moves your eyes in a certain way. You have irregular rhythm where you will still have your movement, you'll have your repetition in a sense, but you would have an odd piece out. Okay. Then you will have your progressive rhythm that moves in a certain order that goes from either like small to big or big to small. Okay. Do you see the difference of the dominoes? And then last, you have your staccato rhythm, which basically is going to be um, a visual active burst of something or the occurrence of like repetition abrupt repetition changing frequently with no set pattern. Okay. Now, what you're going to, real quick, the review. So, we're working on rhythm, but we're also learning about movements and we're learning about patterns. So, rhythm is basically, again, just so you know, because this is very important and I want to make sure that you have this understanding before you start creating and investigating what kind of images you're going to do. The repetition rhythm Rhythm's definition is the repetition of elements to create visual movements. Okay. So repetition is just the reoccurrence of elements that further break down into rhythm and pattern. Okay. And repetition, when you reuse the same or similar elements and it creates a pattern. Pattern is regular and reoccurring and very predictable. Okay. Now, movement directs the viewer's eyes. And when you have movement and you have repetition within your image, you have a variation in the repetition that creates movement, which is ultimately rhythm. Okay. So, what you're going to do when you finish watching this video is you're going to come over to Teams, and in Teams you're going to see something that is called your assignment, which says APDP, which is Design Principle Rhythm Activity. It says for this assignment you are going to explore the design principle rhythm and also learn about patterns, movements, and repetition. To begin, please watch the instructional video below, which will give you a lecture on everything you will need to know to be successful on this assignment, which we're right now in the instructional video. Please note that you have specific due dates for review sessions with me where I will see your draft images to give you feedback. I have already placed the review sessions in the gradebook. Therefore, if you have no work for me to review for feedback on those specified days, you will receive an F grade for participation. I will only hold the review sessions on the dates given in your document. Now, I know you can't see this document on screen, but you'll see it on your screen. And the document I'm talking about is this document here. All right. So let's go ahead and open that up real quick. So this is very important. Please make sure you thoroughly go through and you read this. So this is the handout that's attached to this assignment. It says from October 26th to October 30th. And the due date, see page 2. In this task, you will need to create 21 images. Yes, 21 images, and I will break down for you each image, which demonstrates rhythm and shows that you understand how to add rhythm to your compositions. In your AP OneDrive folder, create a rhythm folder and add your images there. Your goal for this design principle is to create a feeling of movement, pattern, repetition, and rhythm. Now, your first week, what you're going to work on this week is you're going to investigate pattern. And to go into a more thorough investigation of pattern, you're going to watch this video. After you watch this video, you need to start figuring out exactly what direction you want to go to create patterns. But keep in mind this specification. You're going to create 5 pattern images using the following specifications. 2 images inside of the schoolhouse. So if you are a physical student, you're going to do 2 images inside of the schoolhouse. Okay. 2 images inside of your backyard only if you are an MSO student. Now, for everyone else, you guys are going to, and I apologize, this should be 3. You're going to do 3 in your neighborhood for both MSO and physical students. So total, everyone will be doing 5. Only physical students will do the in-schoolhouse. Only MSO students will do the backyard. When you finish with these 5 images, you are going to send them to me to review. Okay. In the Teams post, you're going to see a post for pattern images. You're going to submit your pattern image URL there, the link, so that I can review them and give you feedback. Okay. And so then the pattern images will be due by the 28th or the 29th, whatever class period you're in, that's when they're due. Okay. Then you're going to work on investigate movement using this video. You're going to watch that video just to give you some more help with movement. And then you're going to create 5 movement and motion images using the following specifications. 2 inside of the schoolhouse if you are a physical student. 2 inside of the backyard. Outside of your backyard only if you are MSO. So E is only if you're MSO, D is only if you are physical. And then this is, again, this should say 3 inside of your house for both MSO and physical. You will end up having a total of 5 images. Now, the movement 5 images are due uploaded into Teams. You will see a Teams outline for movement. That is due into Teams October 30th through November 2nd, depending on what class, which period your class falls. If you do not upload it by then, you will receive an F, and I'm not accepting late work. You guys understand the policies. You know exactly what to do. Make sure you turn it in on time. So once you finish with your movement, then you are going to investigate repetition using that video. Then you're going to have to create 5 pattern images using the following specifications. 2 inside of your schoolhouse. I think you're getting the flow, but make sure you read this because it specifies exactly what you're supposed to do. Now, this repetition 5 images are due by November 4th and November 5th. You will see in Teams where you can upload your link from your OneDrive. That's for me to review and give you feedback, okay? Now, and then the last part, once we get through pattern, movement, and repetition, you guys are going to investigate all of the above and the instructional lecture, and then you're going to create 5 rhythm images. They cannot be the same as above. They have to be different. 5 rhythm images, and make sure you name your image. So if you're using pattern, you should say pattern 1, pattern 2, pattern 3, or movement 1, movement 2, movement 3, or repetition 1, repetition 2, repetition 3. For your rhythm, you're going to create 2 images that include movement and repetition, a clear rhythm image. 1 image that includes pattern and repetition but is a clear rhythm image. 1 image that is an irregular rhythm. 1 image that is a progressive rhythm. And 1 image that is a staccato rhythm. Okay? So with that, and this should, I'm sorry, this should be 6 because it totals 21. And I'll make sure I make those edits before you actually get the writing. I mean, you get this assignment in your Teams. But now for your writing, make sure to include all design principles used that we have learned thus far and any elements of arts created. Be very, very, very creative with this, guys, and have fun with it. For grading purposes, I am looking for a minimum of 2 design principles and 2 elements of design that you've learned thus far from the principles of design, and I want to see them in each one of these 24 images. Okay, I mean 21 images. Now, this grading timeline is something new. Make sure you adhere to this grading timeline because I will not accept any excuses and I will not change any grades. Once I put the F in the grade book, it is final. That is it. Okay. So, depending on what class date your class falls on, is when you need to have those items uploaded into your grade book. I'm sorry, into your Teams. Now, for the by November 9th, all 21 images are due, but you have to present your work in a Flipgrid, okay? And you will upload that link to your Flipgrid in Teams. So, what do I mean by that? You're going to come back to the instructions. Oh, I've also put in the PowerPoint that I just did for you. And I give you examples. It's about 10 examples of rhythm for you to check out. Now, you will click on this link here. It'll take you to the Flipgrid, which is here. Okay. And in here, you're going to create a Flipgrid, where you're going to present all 21 of your images in a class video format. If you've forgotten how to input the slides or images, you can click on this video here to watch it. I also have the video here. But you want to make sure that you talk about the design principles you use, the elements of art you use, label each image for whether the image is a pattern, movement, repetition, or it's a full-blown rhythm, okay? You only get 5 minutes to present. Have fun and add some filters and marks. So when you are done presenting and you submit your responses, that link that you get from Flipgrid is what you will upload to this assignment, okay? Should you guys have any further questions, please don't hesitate to let me know. This is like a 2-week process, 2-week assignment, but again, Please keep in mind that you do have due dates where I need to review your work, and I will be putting in grades on these due dates. So make sure you adhere to this, because again, I will not accept excuses and I will not change those F's. With that being said, go ahead and get started and have fun and good luck.